Hi everybody, my name is Jurius Doctor and I'm a teacher with EVE University. This is Planetary Interaction 101. I'm just going to go through a little bit of the preamble here before we begin. So I've been with EVE University for a little over 3 years now, on and off, and I've been a teacher for the last few months. I predominantly teach Fleet 101 and Introduction to EVE University, as well as EVE 102 after the tutorials. Basically, new bro classes meant to introduce people to some of the basics of operating within EVE space. This is my first Planetary Interaction class, but it is something that I do myself regularly and I make a tidy profit from. I will be covering in this class a lot of what you can do with planetary interaction and what it is. The purpose of this class is to teach players the fundamentals of PI and to illustrate the products of PI and how they fit into greater industry. Please make sure that you are all in the lecture.etechuni chat channel. And because this is a little bit more of an intense class, I will ask everyone to X up in that channel, please. Okay, good. Everybody is here and paying attention. If you have any questions, I'm a little bit different from a lot of other teachers in that I will allow you to interrupt me while we're talking. This is a free-for-all class. Please, by all means, ask me if you have any questions. If it is something that I think can wait until the end, I will let you know. But you can also ask your questions in lecture.etechuni, and when I take a break between sections, I will make an effort to answer your questions. If I happen to miss one of your questions, please just repost it again in lecture.etechuni. So in this class, we're going to cover what is planetary interaction, what are the basic materials that you're going to need to do it in terms of getting around, and what the basic fundamentals are, what you can do with it, what you can't do with PI, the skills that are required to do it at an introductory level, determining the products that you want to make, and finding and evaluating planets for their suitability, building your colony, getting goods off planet via the command center, and getting goods off of planet via the spaceport and customs office. Also, managing your outposts and what to do during wartime. I will also cover tips and tricks. This class should take approximately 1 hour, but I'm allowing quite a bit of extra time for questions, and this class is being recorded for YouTube. You will be able to watch this class afterwards. I'm sorry I'm not able to stream it so that you can follow along visually. Unfortunately, my internet connection isn't allowing for that kind of bandwidth right now, but you will again be able to view this from either my YouTube channel or from the forum post where I will share this. Are there any questions before we begin? Dark Lancelot asks, could we get a unit of aqueous liquids? I'd love to say yes. Unfortunately, that's not one of the materials I produce. So that is something I can show you how to make. Unfortunately, you won't be able to go get one of them from me. You also asked the question about slides. I do not have slides prepared for this class. However, what I do have is a wealth of resources that I'll be providing to you in the forms of several links that you will probably need to do this effectively. The very, very first thing that we're going to do is talk about what PI is. So what you can do with planetary interaction. Planetary interaction is basically exactly what it sounds like. You're interacting with a planet to get goods for trade or manufacture. You can create components that are used in the production of player-owned starbases or sovereignty structures, or T2 items. You can create items that are used to fuel posses. This is typically referred to as mining moon goo, because the stuff that you need to do that comes from moons. and creating items that other players doing PI need to create the above items. What you can't do with PI is that you can't create a final product unless you consider fuels as final products. The only exception to that I know of, and it's actually something I produce and I will be showing you the schematic for, is nanite-based, which is unto itself a final product. And it's a consumable and also one of the most highly sought after consumables presently in EVE. The price on it has recently been going up, although it is a very volatile priced product, so it may not be the best one for you to produce when you're first starting out. What you do get out of investing time in PI are consumables, POS fuels, materials for further production, and profit. Often many of the items that are produced through Planetary Interaction are quite time intensive to produce, but carry a high value in return. And depending upon the number of people producing that item and market flood, you can turn around an extremely good profit from them. These PI products are also used in the production of other items that aren't necessarily at the T2 level. For example, mobile tractor units and mobile depots, or MTUs and mobile depots. The items that are needed to manufacture those come from PI. The rest of the materials come from mining. Is there any personal skill on the part of the player required to do PI? No. There's no personal skill required. You don't have to read up a book or, spend any amount of time in a university class. It's not hard to do, but there are some skills in-game that support PI directly. These are skills that you can find the skill books for them pretty much at any training academy in-game or any NPC station where new players frequent. And it's the NPC sellers that typically carry these. You can tell if it's an NPC seller if the sell duration is greater than 90 days. And typically the price for these runs between 35,000 ISK up to 1 million ISK per skill book, although some are more. The skills that you'll need, or that are advantageous to have when doing PI, are science. You need level 3 for remote sensing and level 4 for planetology and advanced planetology. That is your very first minimum barrier to entry, is that in order to do PI, you have to train up the science skill. The good news is training it up to level 3, I think, is about an hour and 45 minutes of investment. It's really not long. Then you need remote sensing. Remote sensing basically allows the scanning of resource density and availability on planets at greater distances at higher levels. So whenever you open up the map and you look at a star system and you look at one that is near you, typically within a couple of jumps, and you view a planet in planet mode, it will either present planetary interaction information to you in the way of materials you can scan for, or it won't. If you can't view that planet in planet mode, or you can't view that planet's resources, it means you don't have your skills trained high enough. The next skill up from there is command center upgrades. And this allows you to take command centers that you plant on a planet and upgrade them so that you can support more resource processing, more planetary extraction and refinement, factory production. Interplanetary consolidation is what allows you to control more than one planet, but for each of these two skills you need planetology. And planetology improves the ability to scan planets and to look at where are those resources. And the reason you need this skill is because you can't extract efficiently if you don't know where the materials are. So once you have a knowledge of where your resources are, once you have the command centers in place, and you have a schema or a plan for attacking how you want to get those materials in order to produce the items that you want, you can begin by moving to a planet and planting a command center on it and starting up the process of managing your PI. And we will get into that in just a second. Advanced planetology is the final skill in this group, which further improves the precision of planetary scans and also allows you control over more planets. When you have your interplanetary consolidation trained up to 5, I believe you get 6 planets out of it. I'm going to actually double check my skill queue right now and let you know if that's true. Yes, it's 6. Ideally, if you're making tier 2 or tier 3 products that carry a decent sell value in the market, you shouldn't need more than 2 or 3 planets to get started. You'll hear people talk about factory planets. These are typically planets that are at a midpoint between 2 planets you're extracting from, where you take materials that have been produced to a third place to be refined into the product that you want to put on the market or that you want to use for manufacturing. Other helpful skills for PI are racial industrial. This supports the hauling of materials between planets and star bases. So by this, the Galente ships are the most specialized for that, in the same way as the Miasmos has a specialized hold for ore. The Epithal has a specialized hold for planetary interaction goods. The Epithal is something you should immediately pick up if you don't have one already, or at least grab the blueprint so you can make yourself one. They're not very expensive and they can be picked up in pretty much every constellation. Now, I'm going to share a couple of links with you, and feel free to explore these as we continue. The first of these is there is a tool that you're going to want to use. It's available for Mac, PC, and Linux, called EVE per hour. And if you plan on taking planetary interaction goods into industry and producing end products or T2 products, you're going to want this tool. I'm going to share the link with you now, and there is a YouTube video attached to this forum post that has the introductory class to EVE per hour presented by the creator of the program for EVE University. This tool basically is a one-stop shop for pricing and planning and material costs and everything else that you could ever want to do with EVE. It'll tell you how long it'll take you to make those items at your current skill level, and you do need to import an API key for that to work, because it takes a look at real-time results from your skill level and where you are at. The second thing that you're going to want is a quick reference tool for looking at what can you make and what are the levels of materials that you can produce. And so for that, the one I prefer to use most frequently is Elise's PI scheme, and I'll copy that to you now. Now, if you could, please click on that link I've just shared. So Elise's PI scheme is basically just a JavaScript interface that shows you the types of planets that exist, and then the levels of resources that can be produced, and what materials at each step along the way you need to produce those greater degrees of materials. So if you mouse over Barren, you'll see that it leaps out, and you can make aqueous liquids, or you can extract aqueous liquids, base materials, carbon compounds, microorganisms, and noble metals from that type of planet. And then from there, you can see what those can be refined into, which are your P1 or basic materials. From there, it jumps out to refined, specialized, and advanced, or as we call them, P1, P2, P3, and P4 columns of materials. And as you mouse down over the different grades of planet, gas, ice, lava, oceanic, plasma, storm, and temperate, it gives you a very colorful, very direct, and very easy to reference tool for seeing, okay, what do I need to make next? Or what do I have to have prepared? This is a great tool for fast reference, and this is particularly useful when you're trying to set up your first planet. So this is a good place to start looking at, what do I want to make, And how do I know that that's something that I want to produce? The second part of that is knowing how much something is worth. And for that, you should be using EVE appraisal. I've just shared that link to you now. If you haven't already, you should bookmark both of these. So EVE appraisal has the benefit that when you go into it, you can immediately enter something either from your clipboard in game. You can just select and copy and then paste it directly into the quick estimate field and click submit, and it'll give you JITA price. JITA is the default, although you can choose other trade hubs from the pull down. So if we wanted to take the example of nanites, I'm going to type nanites in now. A single unit of nanites has a volume of 1.5 meters cubed. A single cell price at JITA is just under 12,000 ISK, whereas the buy value in JITA, or the price that you're likely to get selling to that market, is 11.61 thousand ISK, so 11,610 ISK. Nanites have the value in terms of expediency, in that they produce a very valuable product at a very small volume. So you can produce a lot of nanites and they don't take up a lot of space in your hold. In fact, sometimes when I'm running in a hurry and I need to go pick up some nanites that I'm producing on a planet, I can take a frigate, like a magnate that has a 400 meter cube hold, and grab a fair chunk of nanites and just run them to market for sale, or run them back into my industry to produce something else. So nanites are a good thing to produce, but if you look in game and you look at the market and you search for nanites, and you click on the nanites, you will see that wherever you're located, whether it be in your station or in the nearest system, that there are that product for sale, and it'll tell you the current quantity and the current price on when those sales expire. Now, if you look at the price history, that's the tab very few people actually bother to look at as they're starting out. If you look just above sellers, to the right of market data, you have price history. And I encourage you to expand that window as big as you can make it comfortably in your screen. So if you look at the price history of nanites, they held solid at about 1,000 per unit, or so per 1.5 meters cubed, for a pretty long time, from April through to the beginning of June. And then they took a sudden price spike. Now, that green line that runs through them is the median price that you're looking at. It's the price that is the moving average over 20 days. And this one is very volatile. It's very unstable. Price and demand for those went up in a big way at the beginning of June, and then has continued to kind of hold steady at a higher level, but it is beginning to fall again. And you'll see that the price is starting to correct coming into the end of July. When you're looking at something to make and you're trying to determine if this is something that you're going to produce for market and it's going to make you a decent amount of money, you want to look at things that have a pretty steady moving average. That's the green line. Yes, you may experience dips in the value of the thing that you're selling to market, or you may see huge increases, but having the ability to determine where am I going to make the most consistent income is a big step in the right direction when you're trying to decide what to make. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't make things that are valued lower. In fact, if those things don't get made long enough, eventually supply starts to dwindle and the price on those as well increases. And if you're one of those people who's been stockpiling that thing like water for a very long time, then when the price goes up, that's when you sell. These are the same fundamental principles that impact real-world economy, and a lot of my friends have jokingly called EVE University more of an economics simulator than a game. If you click Show Table, you're also able to see information presented to you in a different interface, where you're able to see quantities of sale, the date, and the price dips that have been experienced over time. This also gives you a really fantastic way to see, based on your current region and where you're looking at, and over time, you can set your time to a year, 6 months, a month, 5 days, or last 10 days. But if you go to Table View and look at a year, you can see the moving average and the average prices for sale on that material that's being sold, and where the price increases have come in, where they've dipped, and you will also see the instances where people will come in with just a stupid amount of that material that maybe they've been stockpiling for a long time, and they just flood the market. Typically, it's immediately following those that you'll see a huge price dip. This is something that can be covered in a more advanced class, but there are people in EVE who specialize in destroying their enemies without ever firing a shot, and that, more than anything, is market control, or as they call it, market PvP. Now, to get back to, I'm digressing a little bit here, to get back to the class. One of the things that we're going to start with here is finding and scanning a planet. So how do you determine what planet? Well, I've given you the Elise's PI scheme to look at what planets for what materials you want to make. Another great tool for looking at planets to use is EVE Planets, and I'll link that to you now. EVE Planets is a great tool because it shows you all the different types of planets, what they look like from space, what materials come out of them. So you can search either by clicking on, for example, barren planet, and it will show you, if you click push, once you've selected barren, it will show you systems with such sets of planets. It'll show you what T1, T2, and T3 materials can be produced from that planet. Some planets will have only T1 or T2 materials available, but as you go through that, it will show you, a barren planet as T1 materials will let you make reactive metals and bacteria. Reactive metals and bacteria are the two things that you need to make nanites. So that's what we're going to start by showing you today. If you go back to the main page of EVE Planets, you can also see that there's ability to search for solar systems. So you can look at the systems nearby you, identify how many and what type of planets that they have, and then you can see the approximate radius or size of those planets. Are they a huge planet or a very small planet? Is the concentration of materials on that planet going to be, better or worse if they're more spread out over a giant planet? This is something that you kind of get a feel for as you start scanning. But we're going to take a look at the system that I'm presently adjacent to, which is YVA in Solitude, or EVE. It's kind of a hard one to say. And type in the solar system that you're in right now, or an adjacent system, and you can do the same thing that I'm doing here, which is to look at Solitude, EVE, and I can see that more than any other system nearby, there's a high number of barren planets in this system. There are 14 planets in YVA, and more than half of them are barren planets. There is one which is particularly huge. YVA 6 has a radius of almost 9,000 kilometers, which means that it is 17,500 kilometers across. It's definitely not the biggest planet in the system. It's nowhere near. I think it's like in 5th or 6th place, but it dwarfs the other barren planets in the system. So I'm going to use that as my starting place to go to. So you can scan planets up to a distance of your remote sensing skill away. The number of systems away is determined by the level of your skill. But if you look in your neocom on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that you have your map, and you may or may not have the planetary colonies option from the Neocom added to your quick bar, but you can find it by going to the Neocom menu, going to Business, and then mousing down to the 5th item in that list, which is planetary colonies. And if you grab and drag that to your quick bar underneath your map, that makes it easy to get to. So you're going to open your map, and you're going to search for YVA. And the second option on that list should be EVE. And if you click on that name, it's going to drop you in on that system. Now, if you open your map search and you type in YVA, you're now looking at the map of it, but you want to get the system information for that system, which you can do either by right-clicking on the sun and saying Show Info, or just by using the search menu to populate the name and then right-click on that and say Show Info. Once you've got that Show Information tab open, you can actually close your map. You won't need it for the rest of this. So once you have that Show Info open, you can go to this the Orbital Bodies tab, which is the center tab. And you'll see the names of any citadels, stations, and planets that are in that system. And I said I wanted YVA 6. I can see that that is a barren planet with 2 moons. Now, if I double-click on the name of that planet, it's going to bring up the planet information for that. You can also click, reach it by clicking on the little information icon to the right of the planet name. And when you look at that, it's going to give you the basic, description of that planet. Going to the Attributes tab will give you the information about the planet in detail. So its orbit radius, escape velocity, mass, all this other lovely information that you probably will never use. This is more for the science geeks out there who enjoy reading about, gravity levels on foreign planets as based on human standard. But one of the important things for coming to this remote planet view and looking at the planet information for YVA6 is that if you look at the hamburger menu, as it's called in design, the little set of 4 lines at the top left of the window next to Planet Information, Actions, and you click on that, you'll see Save Location and View in Planet Mode. We want to view this planet in Planet Mode. When you click that, it's going to bring up a planetary view of that planet floating in space against the backdrop of space for that system. This is kind of fun. You get to spin it around and take a look at it. But you'll notice as part of the interface here, at the top left, you have Build and Scan. I want you to click on the Scan tab. And when you reach the Scan tab, you'll see directly beneath it, you have set the maximum visible resource limit slider. The closer to the left you slide that, the more of that thing that you see. The further to the right you slide that slider, the less you see. Now, in this case, we want to make base metal, or we want to extract base metals in microorganisms. So I'm going to start by looking at base metals. And if I click on base metals and I have that slider all the way to the left, I'm going to see a heat map of the presence of those metals on this planet. And this is a pretty rich planet. Mind you, I've got my slider pretty far to the left, but it's going to say white for highest densities, cooling into oranges and reds for higher but not highest, and then cooling out to absolute blue for where there's none whatsoever. So if you adjust that slider, you can see, how much visibility you gain and lose. And as you slide that slider around, if you go as far out as you can before you stop seeing patches of white, that's where your highest concentrations of that material are on this planet. And I can see that there's quite a cluster of them around the upper hemisphere. There's a good 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them here. There's 1 or 2 around the equator, but the southern hemisphere seems to be the the highest concentration. So if I look at the planet from below, I can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 concentrations of base metals. So that's probably going to be the place where I'm going to want to start extracting those materials. Now, I also want to be able to extract microorganisms within a pretty close proximity to those, because I don't want to set them too far from my command center. So when I switch to microorganisms, I look at that and I can see that there's basically two bands running around the planet that are high in concentration. One more or less ringing the lower third of the planet, and the other one ringing the upper third. Now, keeping in mind that microorganisms exist in space on other planets as they would on Earth, as much as we can theorize, this is exactly how they exist on Earth. Things are going to operate best in places where the temperature is neither too hot nor too cold, the Goldilocks zone. So it makes sense that I'm going to find these in concentrations near the north and south poles, but in an area where it's not too cold. So what I want to do is kind of find a midpoint between these two, where I'm able to extract a fair number of microorganisms, but I also want to be able to reach the concentrations of the base materials that have gravitated towards the highest areas of convection within the crust, and also where the magnetic fields are strongest. So if I switch back and forth really quickly between my base metals scan and my microorganism scan, and I take a look at an area where the two are closest to overlapping, that's probably where I'm going to want to put my command center. And I found one. There's a nice little cluster where there's two very close patches of base metals, pretty much sitting right on top of a major pocket of microorganisms. Now that I know that that's where I want to go, YVA6, one of the things that I can do is I can right-click on the name of the planet at the top left, just above the Build and Scan buttons, and I can go Save Location. And I'm going to save that to my personal location. I'm saving it as Baron 6, so that I know the planet type and which planet name it is. That's just a shortened format that I use for myself. Your own naming conventions can be a lot more elaborate if that suits your personality. But typically you want to have it named to something that is, what is it you're going there to extract? What type of planet is it? And where is it located? So if I wanted to add that I'm extracting nanites from this planet, I would call it Baron 6 Space Tech Space Nanites. And that's just so that the bookmark doesn't run too long in my overview when I'm looking at my people and places in space, or if I'm right-clicking for the context menu. Now, I can't create that bookmark from where I am right now because I'm not presently in space and I'm not nearby. So I'm going to just keep that window open but put it off to the side. And then I'm going to close the Planetary Interaction view by clicking the little X above Scan that says Exit Planet Mode. So now that I'm in station and I'm looking at my bestower, I need to have a barren command post to plant on that planet to take out the materials from that barren planet. There is a command post for each planet type, and you cannot extract planetary interaction resources from a planet if you don't have the correct command center. So the first thing you need to do is go and buy one of those. You can find those in pretty much any standard NPC market, station around you, and they are 1,000 meters cubed in size, and their prices can range depending where you're looking, but typically they're about 80 to 300,000 ESK. Typically, if you find these and they're a few jumps away in nullsec and they're selling for more, it's a trap. Don't buy them. Go to the nearest high-sec station you can reach that has them for sale in a reasonable price range. Any questions so far?
I showed up late, but how is it a trap?
Well, if you are in a ship that has a hold of at least 1,000 meters or greater, then there is a really, really good bet you're in an industrial that doesn't move very fast and probably isn't tanked very well. And if you have to go 2 jumps into low sec or null sec to get that thing, especially if it's a very large system, and that station is not very close to guns, then they're setting you up for a prime situation where they are free to prey upon you as easy pickings. So the only reason to pay more is the convenience in moving one. If you're going to, as Ricky Big mentions in chat, if you go to a system and you have a planet that you want to set PI up on in that system, and they put the value of that thing there at, say, 1 million per command center, but it's available in system, it means that you don't have to travel farther away to move it. Now, if somebody is charging 10% of NPC prices, Ricky points out, they're likely monitoring you and they'll blow you up the moment you try to retrieve it. That's the trap part. Either the trap is they're trying to get you into a system where they have a gate camp set up, or they have the ability to get to you quickly, it being that you're in an industrial ship and typically don't move very quickly, and they're looking for the easy pickings. Now, as I mentioned previous to the recording of this class, I'm going to be flying a bestower that I fit a bunch of extra power cores into, and is fit with a 50 MN micro warp drive 1. And the reason for that is that I can get up to just under 800 meters per second move speed on this. It also allows me to pulse it once to get to warp more quickly. And if I ever end up jumping through the wrong gate and have to burn back to the gate, I do so a heck of a lot more quickly than I would if I was just doing this in a bestower that was fit for extra cargo space and tank. Now, the turnabout on that is that there are, as I mentioned, the epithal and other industrials that you can use that are bonused for planetary interactions. But in this case, I'm not using this to collect the goods. I'm using this bestower just to drop off my command stations and then return to safety. The nice thing to note is that except for when you're dropping command centers on a planet, or when you're collecting goods that you would send out, sorry, Kajin asks, why not a fast industrial with an MWD and cloak? That's what I normally run on this. The only thing that's not presently on this vessel is the cloak, but I'm in high sec immediately adjacent to the Solitude home, so I'm not terribly worried. The advantage right now to this guy is that I'm really just going to be dropping off the command centers, and unless you're in space, dropping off a command center or orbiting that planet so that you can retrieve goods, the rest of the PI that you do can be done for the safety of a station. Mostly you're just monitoring and working on your production remotely. So we've covered finding and scanning a planet and selecting the planet that you want to use for the materials that you want to produce. Now we're going to go and place a command center. So I'm going to undock. I'm going to add a couple of planetary command centers to this vessel, and I'm going to undock, and then I'm going to jump over to the next system, go to that planet, and drop those command centers where it makes sense for me to place them. You must be in space and have the command center in your ship's hold to place at that planet, and you must go to the planet mode while you're in orbit of that planet in order to place the command center and build it. So in order to do that, you're going to go to the build menu in the planet view and click command centers, and then select the command center and click where you want it to be placed in situation to those resources on that planet. You don't have to have it in that same place, but you do need to have it connected to the rest of your network if you want to use the command center to launch goods to space. The command center is being used as a small storage facility. Have a very, very small storage capacity. It's only 500 cubic meters. So typically if you're launching something to space, you're launching something in small quantity, or you're launching something that is like a P4 that has been finished being produced, that is worth a lot, but there's not a lot in terms of volume or in terms of quantity of that item. One thing to keep in mind about planetary interaction is that it is a game of diminishing returns. Elise's PI scheme and the EVE appraisal are great tools for finding out what you want to make and what is needed to make them, but it doesn't get into the details of how many units of each are produced and how many of those units of each, like reactive metals and bacteria, do you need to consume to make the next higher tier. So in the case of nanites, it may be 40 units of reactive metals and 40 units of bacteria to produce the base nanites. But to turn nanites into something else, for example, if you go from nanites up to biotech research reports or into transcranial microcontrollers, you lose again from your nanites into the transcranial microcontrollers volume being produced. So for transcranial, I need nanites and biocells. So I may need 100 nanites and 100 biocells. You don't. At each step of the way, there is a percentage of those get consumed, building up to the next higher. And you're not always saving space in doing so. Sometimes the things that you produce are much bigger than the combined parts that you produce them from. So for the sake of the video that I'm recording, I'm just going to go and do that now. I'm going to place those command centers. Now is a good time to ask questions, as I will have some freedom from speaking. Ricky makes the comment, you can be right outside right outside a station to deploy a command center as well. You don't have to warp to the planet, you only have to be undocked. The proviso there is that you have to be in the same system as that planet. You can't place a command center remotely. So in this case, I'm adding 2 barren command centers to my bestower. I'm only going to place one presently, but I will place the other one later. The reason for this is I'm going to have more than one planet producing the same type of material so that I can produce more of that material. And I'm going to undock. Drac asked the question, when scanning the planet, can the 2 resources actually overlap? Yes, they can, and they often do. The issue is that you really want them to, because when you are placing your extractors, you don't want your extractors overlapping one another. And this is unfortunate, but my game client seems to be screwing up. It has
Docking permission
it has not
requested.
rendered my ship, so I'm going to have to undock again.
Docking request accepted.
But yes, to answer your question, if the resources overlap, one another, you can take advantage of that. However, you have to make sure that when you're placing your extractor heads, that you place your extractor heads in a pattern that allows both extractors to draw from the same area, depleting 2 different resources. It's not efficient to do it that way, so you typically shouldn't, but there are people who do it and who experience good returns on it. Everybody's plans are different. You ask the question, or Drac asked the question again, how do the concentrations of resources on a planet change over time? So when people are talking about, sometimes they call it planet shift or resource shift, that does happen. As you and as others extract from a planet, those concentrations will deplete and they will get lower over time. So if you happen to find a planet that's really prodigiously populated with something, there's a lot of that material, and it's an extremely affluent planet, you may be drawn to go extract there. But if everybody else is also drawn to extract there, you're going to see a huge reduction in that volume over time. Now, naturally, the planets will shift from downtime to downtime where those resources are concentrated. They won't shift a great deal typically. You have a situation where something depletes completely and you have to move all of your extractors and resource collection facilities and storage facilities and so on. But it does happen where one day something will be there and then a couple of downtimes later they're gone. This is where the frequency with which you check your PI becomes important. Also, extractors are more efficient when they're extracting on the short term. So if you are in a situation where you are extracting one material from a planet and you set a shorter return cycle for that extraction, you'll typically get a higher volume from a high concentration than you get if you set it for like a 4-day cycle. So if you say I want to cycle this for 1 day and I'm going to check on it tomorrow at the same time when I get off work, if you monitor that daily or even twice a day, you're able to adjust for shifts and placement and move your extractor heads to maintain a high return. And yes, the resources will move. They will creep over the planet and increase or decrease in density at different points. So it is important to check on it and also to make sure that your runs are still going. Now, for the purposes here, well, because I am in a fairly safe system, I am going to temporarily go to an Astrahouse to tether. While I do this PI. Targa asks, is there a video stream or something to watch? Presently I am recording this for YouTube and you will be able to watch it following the class. Unfortunately, my internet connection has not been friendly for the stream, so even at a 1000 bit rate it was losing like 70% of the packets, so I'm unfortunately not going to have a video for you until after the class. Are there any other questions while I'm repositioning myself in space?
Yeah, just one. Doctor?
Yes.
Are you a doctor?
No, my name is a play on words from Latin. A Jurius Doctor is the certification you get when you become a lawyer.
Oh, now I get it. Yeah, I just wasn't pointing in the right direction. Never mind. Nice. Nice play on words, though.
Yeah. I have a habit of being a little bit of a rules lawyer, so I just thought it was funny to name my character that. Plus,
I like it.
Plus the number of lawyers I've met who play EVE. EVE is full of very smart people. You are all very intelligent people, and I like it when people look at it and they go, so are you practicing criminal or civil? Because I immediately know, ha, you're a lawyer. I don't hold that against anyone, but there are a high number of people in IT, in law, in engineering, in sciences, in the military who play this game. A lot of students. And a lot of people who are studying law. And you know what? The learning curve for EVE is a lot like the learning curve for first and second year law, I can tell you from personal experience. Alright, so returning back to the PI class. What I'm going to do now is, now that I'm safely tethered at an Astrahouse in space, I am in space, I'm going to open up the planetary view for Planet 6. Now, when I'm in space, in that particular system, I can actually just right-click in space, go to planets, go down to Planet 6, and I can say View in Planet Mode. It's just above moons and custom offices. Now, another thing that you should do before you decide to plant something on that planet is to take a look at the customs offices and pull up the information for the customs office for that planet and show info. It will tell you who your landlord is and who you're paying taxes to, and it will also tell you what the current tax rate is. So if you go to attributes you will see that there's a tax rate. Now, my present tax rate on this planet is 7%, which is outstanding. Typically, if you're in high-sec, you'll find anywhere between 10 and 14%, some planets as high as 18. If you see anything with a tax rate higher than 12, I will tell you unequivocally, do not build there. You are paying too much of your hard-earned money to continue to mine something on that planet, and you will be charged that tax rate every time you take something off the planet through the customs office. So some people will try to skirt this by using their command center to launch things to space, and when you do that, it will launch it in basically what is the equivalent of a jet can, which means that it's only good in space for a little while. You have to go and pick it up, and this is why it's ideal to be orbiting the planet when you do this. But only being able to launch 500 meters cubed at a time can be a real stinker when it's when you've got a lot of materials waiting on the planet. So paying attention to that tax rate is very, very important. But now I'm going to go into Planet 6 in planet mode, and I'm going to place my command center. Some of the uni-controlled command posts, or customs offices charge very, very low rates, or even 0%, but you have to make sure that you are in a system and at a planet where you have those advantages. These are often planets and moons that are near uni or alt character controlled player owned starbases for the advantage of being inside a POS shield and not being bumped. Also, thank you Anduccio for bumping me. Bump success. However, you can't bump me very far because the mass of your ship is so small.
I will go
Now,
buy something bigger.
Oh yeah, just push your luck. So I am looking at Planet 6, and I'm going to go back to the scan view because I want to see where those concentrations are before I go and place my command center. So I'm looking at base metals and microorganisms. Microorganisms become bacteria, and base metals will get refined up so that I can combine with the bacteria to make nanites. So looking at these concentrations, I can see I've got a few bands to choose from. But I'm going to go with a concentration on the southern hemisphere where I've got 2 pockets of base metals right next to a big chunk of microorganisms. They pretty much make a triangle. So then I'm going to go to the Build tab. I'm going to choose Command Centers, Barren Command Center, and I'm going to pick a location more or less equidistant from the 3 and plant it right in the middle. And once I've done that, you'll see that there is a Edits Pending tab or view that pops down underneath the Build and Scan buttons. And if you're looking at the same space as me on the planet, which you will when you're watching this video, you can actually see that there's almost a correlating dip in the resources for autotrophs as there wherever there's a increase in resources for base metal. Now, these aren't necessarily true causation. You know, correlation does not equal causation. But if I jump back and forth from base metals to microorganisms, where I see microorganisms go up, I see base metals go down, and vice versa. So at least in this particular region of this planet that I'm looking at, it holds true. So finding a space equidistant between them, I'm going to plant my command center, and then I'm going to zoom in on my command center, and I can see right now I'm not using any CPU, and I'm not using any power, and right now I'm looking at 0 cost to plant this command center because I physically have one in my hold. Now if you zoom in on the command center and you click on the little round circle that is its placement, you see a little holograph of the actual structure pop up. And beneath this you have a few different options. You have upgrade, launch, storage, stats, links, routes, and decommission. Decommission you only use if you're destroying it, tearing it down, and tearing up the structure that's there. Upgrades is where your planetary command center upgrades skill comes in. Now based on the current skill I'm trained for, I can upgrade this command center up to level 4, which is what I'm going to do now. That tells me that my power output is going to increase to 9,000 megawatts, and I'm going to have a CPU output of about 15.5 K teraflops. The cost of this is going to be 2.7 million ISK, so I'm just going to say upgrade. And then there, the upgrade level bar slides to the right, and I know that I'm ready to start building. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to set out my extractors. Before I can do this, I want to say submit on the pending changes. And now I have a command center placed. And if I go to the build tab and I go to extractor control units, I can choose Baron Extractor Control Unit. And it's got a field of influence around a big white circle where you can set the maximum range in which the extractor heads will reach. So I'm going to try and put this a little ways out from my command center because I need room to build my factories and my storage centers, but I want that sphere of influence to cover the whole of the deposit, or maybe even overlap a couple of deposits. In this case, I'm going to set it slightly overlapping two of the concentrations of autotrophs that I have, just in case the resource moves. And then I'm going to add another Baron Extractor Control Unit, and this time I'm going to switch to the Scan tab and switch to Base Metal, and I'm going to try and place this sphere of influence roughly overlapping the two concentrations I mentioned earlier. So now I have two Extractor Control Units set out. I'm going to click Submit. So now I have two Extractor Control Units set out, but I haven't told them what to extract yet. The next step is to click on the extractor control units, and then the very first option is survey for deposits. So when you click survey for deposits, your scan view disappears, because now what you're going to do is you're going to control your scanning from within the extractor control unit menu. As you build structures, the amount of power you have available for your command center and the amount of compute that you have for your command center goes down based on the type, size, and number of heads that you add to your extractors. So you don't want to add so many that you're not able to build the other things that you need to refine that planetary material into something better. So there's a little bit of a balancing act to be had here. The other part of this too is that when you add extractor heads and select the area where you're going to extract from, it will tell you what the output is. And if you want to make something which has a particular input requirement for base materials, you don't want to be building too many or extracting too many of one product and not enough of the other. You want to try and balance it so you have an even output, so you don't end up with a massive backlog of one material over another and then constantly have to be shifting. As a new player, that's typically the approach you want to take. If you are somebody a little bit more experienced and you've got more than one planet of that type producing materials, you can probably make it level out in the works, and it all depends upon what's most efficient for your particular setup. But in this case, I'm going to use a balanced approach. So I'm going to start by scanning for, or selecting for base metals. So I've selected my southern of the two extractors, and over to the right hand side underneath where it's flashing idle, I'm going to click on base metals. It's the second icon from the left. And then that brings back up my scan view, where I can change the slider to show my concentrations and really kind of hone in on where I want to set my extractor heads. And then to activate extractor heads so that you can install them, there's a series of 10 blue dots on the left. You're going to click those off one at a time. And as you click them, a series of heads is going to appear, and they're going to show up as little spheres surrounding the extractor. And what you can do is you can click and drag on those and drag them into the areas where you will be extracting. And as you do this, the little output bar in the middle, the program view, is going to show you how much you're extracting based on the area you're extracting from. But this is based on an immediate 1 hour program cycle. So this is, I'm going to run for 1 hour, and these extractors in the course of that 1 hour are going to extract X amount of goods. Now, just based on 1 hour, I'm going to get 4,500 units over the course of that hour, with a diminishing return to approximately accumulated 18,940 units in the last quarter of that hour. Now, if I say install program, it's just going to start mining now, but that's pretty useless because I don't want to have to come back in an hour and check on this. So extractor area size at the bottom has a plus and minus to the left of it, and clicking on that's going to increase the size of the area, but it's also going to increase the duration of the run. Now, something funny happens when I get past 2 hours, is that initially I have a dip in how much resources I'm able to extract after the first 15 to 45 minutes. But then as I go farther, it starts to climb again. And this is because the area around each of those extractors is getting bigger. So as I get closer to 4, 5, 6 hours, I can see that there's some ebb and flow in the production of this material over time. Now I'm going to want to check on this in 2 days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to the maximum where in the increments of time are 30 minutes, which is 1 day. Sorry, 2 days here. Let me just go to here. 2 days, 1 hour, and 30 minutes, I believe, is the limit. Yeah, 2 days, 1 hour, and 30 minutes is the limit by which the increments in which it's pulling materials is every half hour. After that, it goes to every hour. And the longer you go out, the less frequently it's going to complete its cycles. The cycles are going to go slower. But you'll notice that at 2 days, 1 hour, and 30 minutes, the spheres around the extractor areas, extractor heads, have gotten quite a bit larger. And I can move these around to try to optimize my output. But right now, on a 2 day cycle, I'm getting well above 10,000 at peak. I'm getting just under 12,000 units, which is decent for a planet of this size. So I'm just going to say install program. And once I do, I'm going to have my edits pending window, and I have to click submit. Once I click submit, it's actually going to start extracting those materials. And now I'm going to move up to the other extraction head and start the same process for the microorganism. So if you'll bear with me in a little bit of silence, I'm just going to make those clicks now. And again, you don't want to build so many extractor heads that you no longer have ability to plant additional facilities, because that's going to put you in the suck, in the sense that you're not going to have enough power to build the factories and the storage facilities that you need to produce your end results. Now, you're all familiar with the CCP logo, right? It's a series of 7 dots, all formed into a cluster, basically a hex cluster. This is what we call the CCP configuration, and that's what I'm going to put my extractors' heads in now. Oddly enough, this is also one of the most efficient configurations for your extractor heads in the entire game. Now, if you put your extractor heads too close together and their orbits begin to overlap, you'll see the numbers next to the extractor heads turn red. Basically what that means is that you're double dipping from yourself, and that you're reducing the efficiency of both of those extractor heads. The example that I'll use is from the movie There Will Be Blood, and that is if you have 2 straws going into the same cup, what happens? Somebody's drinking your milkshake. You don't want to be in the position of reducing your own output by doubling up over the same area. And this goes back to the question earlier about, can you have 2 resources overlapping the same area? Yes, you can, but you don't want your extractor heads overlapping the same area, because you're basically, reducing your outputs pretty substantially. So now that I have the area selected, I'm going to say install program and submit again. And at each step of these phases, I'm making sure to submit and commit those builds. Then you're going to want to add a storage facility so that those resources have a place to go to. Depending on how much you're extracting, you may actually want to add 2. So I'm going to add extraction facility, and then I'm going to click planetary links and say create link, and I'm going to click on the extraction facility or the storage facility to the extractor head and create another link connecting the other 2. When that's done, I'm going to hit submit. Now, if you click on an extractor, if you click on a link, if you click on a command center or a storage facility, you can upgrade these. They are upgradable items. Upgrading links just increases the amount of resources that can flow through those links. It's not really a substantial gain in any way. Some people do choose to upgrade them. I always upgrade mine at least 2 levels. Not that I've ever had a reason not to. But it costs money and it uses power. So now what I need to do is I need to route the material that these extractor heads are cycling and send them to that storage facility. So in this case, I'm going to go to my products, I'm going to see that I have microorganisms at my top one. I'm going to say create route. And from create route, I'm going to choose to route it to my warehouse. And I'm going to do the same for the other extractor. And then I'm going to submit the changes. So now if I look back at each of those extractors and I look at the products, it will say routed. Now I need a way to take those products and refine them into another next higher stage. In this case, my goal has always been to make nanites, so I'm going to say processor, and I'm going to take a barren basic industry facility and plant one next to my center. Now, unfortunately, I've made a mistake and I've produced too many extractor heads to have enough remaining power to do what I said I was going to need to do. So I've committed the very error that I warned you guys against. I did this on purpose so that I could demonstrate what the error looks like. But if I try to plant that barren basic industry facility, you get the error. You cannot construct another barren basic facility on this planet, as it would dangerously overload your command center's power. And yet, it won't let me do that. So we have to go in and edit one of the outputs from these. So I'm going to go to my autotrophs extractor. I'm going to say stop program. I'm going to isolate the head that I want to remove, and I'm going to turn it off. In this case, I'm going to remove 2, just to give myself enough power leeway to add that other reprocessing facility. And I'm going to reinstall the program and submit. And now I can place my barren industry facility and create the link to the warehouse. You also want to make sure that you have enough power for a spaceport, because otherwise you have no way of getting your stuff off the planet unless you want to take it through the CAN Express through your command center. And you want to make sure that you have a link to go back to your storage facility as well. So now all of the various things I've built are connected to the storage facility, and I have the ability to route everything there. Now if I click on my storage facility and I look at storage, it will show me the goods that are presently in that warehouse, and if nothing has been dumped there yet, because these cycles again take a while to run, they cycle every hour or every half hour, I can look at my routes button on the industry setup and choose the resources that I'm extracting, in this case base metals and microorganisms, and I can choose to route them to that processing facility. But I can't do that until I tell the processing facility what to build. I mean, imagine that you're working in a warehouse and you're, it's a meat packing plant, and all of a sudden somebody shows up with a truck full of metal. Well, that doesn't make any sense. He's obviously in the wrong place. So you need to be producing the right type of good for the materials that you have. So when you open your basic processor and you choose schematics, it's going to give you a list of the things that that processor can build. Basic processors build T1s. Your advanced processors build your T2 products, and your high-tech processors build your P3 and P4. So I'm going to choose bacteria. And then from the storage facility, I'm going to route my autotrophs to that processor. And then I'm going to go back to the processor and route the bacteria to the storage facility. And once I've done that, I'm going to click submit. And I'm going to repeat this process for each of the other things that I need to make. And you can adjust the number of heads that you have, and the placement of items, and the number of links that you have connecting things in order to accommodate the amount of goods that you produce. A lot of people will just stop at making one thing on a planet and then take those goods and transport them to another planet for production. But you have a great deal more control at each planet's level than a lot of people realize. Any questions so far? So in my second processor, I'm also going to do the same thing for nanites. Or sorry, for the next tier. Which in this case is reactive metals. So my input is 3,000 units of base metals, and my output is 20 units of reactive metals. And then from my barren storage facility, I'm going to route my base metals to the processor, and I'm going to route the reactive metals back to the storage facility. So now I have a storage facility that, once I submit my changes, is receiving the raw goods from my extractor heads and passing them to the processors, which are refining those down into their T2 or T1 components, at which point I'm going to take these out to a factory planet and refine them further. In this particular system, YVA, I'm going to set up 3 or 4 planets in this way so that I am getting bacteria and reactive metals on each of the planets, and then I'm going to have a 4th planet that I'm going to use for refining those down to nanites. And that's how you do it. Now, when you go on to make your next level, part of the reason I linked eVisc per hour for you is that you want to be able to see, if you want to take these nanites and combine them with something else, what are the other things that you need to obtain? What are the other things that you need to buy or manufacture in order to get to that next level? And in order to really get into and understand what you can produce and what's required at each of those levels, there's another resource that you should have. You can either use just ISK per hour, or you can use schemas and Excel basically to track what you're producing. EVIS per hour really just makes it easier for you. It provides more interaction. It provides a greater degree of minutia and feedback in terms of what is being, what is being brought into each of the individual blueprints for producing the thing that you want. But in order to know what's required, you need a schema. You need to know what blueprints go together and what materials go together in order to produce that end product. So I'm going to share another resource with you now. So if you go to EVE Planets in the link that I provided earlier in chat, and you click on schemas, or even just mouse over it, you're going to get a drop-down menu that's going to show you all the different tiers and what can be made. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4. At the Tier 4 level, you get stuff like POS tower fuel, nano factories, self-harmonizing power cores, nanite repair paste, and so on. Now, up until setting up this demonstration, I wasn't doing any PI on my main. I use my alt for all of my PI, and I am producing nanite repair paste. Every step of the way, I am producing all of the goods that go into it. But how do you go about doing that? So if you mouse over schemas and go down to nanite repair paste and click, it's going to give you a browsable schema. But the way that they present it is kind of limited. It's kind of like looking at one of those genealogy charts in high school when you're learning about biology and passing on of genetic traits. So I'm going to give you one that's been cleaned up a little bit and is a little prettier. So if you look in lecture.e-uni, you're going to see a link that I've just shared to an image in Blogspot called nanite.jpg. Everybody take a look at that. So here is the block level schema for making nanite repair paste. In order to make nanite repair paste, you need nanites, gel matrix biopaste, and data chips. So those are the finished products that get combined to make nanite repair paste using the blueprint for nanite repair paste. Now, to make gel matrix biopaste, you need biocell superconductors and oxides, and each of those come from components: oxygen, oxidizing compounds, plasmoids, water, precious metals, and biofuels. So just to make that one material, the gel matrix biopaste, you've got to go through 4 steps of refinement. Can anybody guess at how many planets I have to run in order to produce this?
3.
Is that your guess? Is that your
That's
final
a
answer?
guess.
I'll say 6.
I'm gonna say 4.
4 is the minimum. You can reasonably do this with 4. You can do it with fewer if you're buying some of the goods. If you're relying on the production of other individuals to produce some of what you need to make that paste. Now, one of the nice things about EVIS per hour is that if you have your API set up, it will show you, based on your skills, which of the things that you need to make that nanite repair paste. And it will show you can produce and can't produce materials for that nanite repair paste. Based on your current character and which API is loaded, you can show, hey, I can make the nanites, I can make the aqueous liquids, I can make the superconductors or oxides, but maybe I can't make the microfiber shielding. Maybe I don't have the planets for those required items. For example, making industrial fibers, I can totally do that on a barren planet. I can make autotrophs into industrial fibers. I don't need to turn autotrophs into bacteria. However, I don't have any planets set up right now on this character for felsic magma. I don't have any lava planets. So that's going to get in the way of my being able to make microfiber shielding. So in this case, I'm going to buy my microfiber shielding, or I may even go one step farther and pay a little bit more money and buy data chips. So if I'm going to switch here in my video view now, you'll be able to watch this later in the finished video. If I switch to my IPH, IPH has got a lot of flexibility. It's able to update prices from everywhere in the game. You can literally do a bulk download, which will give you all the prices of everything ever, and it'll show you in real time what they are at based on their last index against the game. Right now I'm pulling from the data source EVE Central instead of CCP because CCP servers are a little bit slower, but EVE Central is pretty up to date right now. So I'm operating in Solitude. If I wanted to look at prices in Solitude and I wanted to look at raw materials, and planetary, and I look in here at my blueprints and I pull up the selected blueprints and I look at nanite repair paste. I can actually just type in nanite. Once I've selected the nanite repair paste blueprint, it's going to say, total run default is 1, and it's going to tell me that my raw materials list is nanites 4, gel matrix biopaste 1, and data chips 1. Now if I wanted to buy those individually, the cost right now in my region is 11,000 per nanite and 122,000 per gel matrix biopaste, 115,000 per data chip. So if I'm making a lot of nanite repair paste, that's going to be pricey. I can also choose the station in the manufacturing facilities where I want to produce that, so that I can set the tax rate that's most advantageous for me, and based on the blueprints that I have available to me, the highest time and material efficiency, which will help reduce my costs quite a bit. But one of the really, really great things about EVIS per hour is that if I have all of these goods and I have these items on hand and I can produce them, it will tell me what my total costs are and my total profit per hour. Now in this case, I'm producing, I haven't yet set a sell price and I haven't yet set a sell location. So my cost per hour is basically raw is per hour, 2,700,000 per hour to produce this. But what I'm able to sell them for should ideally make up for that in a big way. And right now I'm operating at about 170% return on my sale of nanite repair paste. Are there any questions about that? All right. So we've covered setting up your command center, placing your buildings, routing your goods, placing your links. The routes and everything that connects your different products. Once you finish producing a product, you need to get it to space. And as stated, there's two ways to do that. You can either route products to your command center and then use launch to send those to orbit in a container, or you can use the spaceport. Now, as I've just built this and my goods are all still routing, I don't have a finished product to launch to space. But what will happen is that when you launch goods to space, it's going to open the launch dialog box, which shows you the Planetary Customs Office. And if you have more than one launch pad on a planet, you have a pull-down menu to select between the launch pads, so you can decide which one you want to launch from. You can also use this to transfer goods between launch pads if you have more than one type of production happening on a planet. So if you want to launch goods up to space so that you can transfer autotrophs to another launch pad because you have a connected factory making nanites, that would be a way to do it. But that's a very expensive way to do it because you get charged each time you transfer stuff to space and then back down to the planet. So ideally you want to be in the position where you're sending stuff to space just once. When it gets launched into space, you'll have a list of items that have been found. You'll drag those over to the customs office and then you'll click transfer. And then when you're in space at that planet, within 2,500 meters of that customs office, you can then retrieve those goods from that office, transfer them into your hold, and then return to your dock, or take them to market, or transfer them to another planet for further reduction into other goods. Now, what to do with wartime when you're trying to extract goods and when you're trying to manage your planetary interaction. Actions that can be done from anywhere in the galaxy, even while included in a station, are creating of any building except the command center, destruction of any building including the command center, creation of links and routes, modification of ECU programming or extractor control unit programming, and launches from a command center. The actions that can be performed if within remote sensing range are scans of planetary resources, and actions that can be performed within the same system in space, and if not cloaked, are placing a command center, maybe an issue to size of the command centers. So again, you have to have a ship big enough to transport them, and you have to be in the same system. And the importing and exporting goods through a launch pad. You can't do that remotely, you have to be in space. Actions that can be performed only at a specific location are adding and removing items from a customs office or picking up items from a PLC, so planetary launch container, which again are very much like a jet can. They have a limited number of hit points and they only last in space so long. Now, whenever you launch goods from your command center to a container, it's automatically going to create a bookmark in your journal that you can fly to. So it's going to say planetary launch detected. Here's your journal entry for the fact that you launched it at this time. And when you click on that journal entry, it's going to show you the bookmark, and you can fly directly to it just by right-clicking and saying warp to. It's very important that you fly in and grab those as quickly as possible, and ideally that you don't want to be taking anything off planet in wartime, because you're going to be moving in a ship that's not terribly well defended, unless you have some sort of escort to accompany you. Either you're flying a combat alt or you have a couple of other ships willing to do your shopping runs with you. Now again, my typical fit for this bestower is that it will have an MWD and a cloak, because what I will typically do is I will fly to a planet, pick up the goods that I need, align away, cloak, wait until I'm at a line speed and far enough away from the station that I'm, or the custom center, that I'm not worried about getting accidentally uncloaked. And when I'm operating at full speed, I'll drop the cloak, turn on my MWD for one pulse, and then get away. Typically it takes me about 8 to 10 seconds for that full cycle to kick through. So from the time I drop cloak, turn on my MWD for a single pulse, and then set warp, it takes about 8 to 10 seconds for me to warp off, which is actually pretty quick for a bestower. Which cuts it down from like 15 to 16 seconds with the align time. So really the advantage for the cloak is just not being able to be seen and being able to get my align direction down, so I'm not waiting for my ship's thrusters to point me in the right direction before getting up to speed. Any questions about that? Any questions about anything else we've discussed today? Excellent. Well, I thank you all for joining us for this class. It's been an hour and a half long. Haven't been too many questions. I think everybody seems to have gotten this okay, and I will let you know as soon as the video is posted. I will share the link immediately. Thanks everyone for participating and coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jurius.
Thank you.